Hey guys, this is Dr. Gabe Ariciu. Just wanted to touch base with you about different thyroid issues. Thyroid is by far one of the most common things I see in my office. Hashimoto's being probably the most common of the thyroid issues, which makes sense since it's the most common thyroid problem that is out there that we're dealing with. But I wanted to go through 6 different patterns of thyroid problems that you can run into, kind of break down what I do to help with them, how common they are, and just kind of go through them. So this will kind of start it off as we're going through it. This is the first pattern, but I wanted to show you the full thyroid metabolism. So thyroid metabolism, as you can see here, is going to start with your hypothalamus, and it's going to go down through your pituitary, where you get the signal of TSH that goes to your thyroid. TSH you might be familiar with, that's thyroid stimulating hormone. That's one of the most common markers different doctors will run. And it's essentially telling the pituitary, or your brain is telling your thyroid, hey, let's step on the gas a little bit. It's going to stimulate the thyroid to create hormone. When you get to thyroid, you're going to see the thyroid hormone production. And so if you've ever heard of T3 and T4, T4 is probably the most common one that you'll see on blood panels that many doctors will run. Usually they'll do TSH and T4, but the 4 and the 3 is actually referring to the amount of iodines that are attached to it. And so T3 is your actual active thyroid hormone. T4 is still active, just not as strong. And as you go from there, you're going to see just kind of how it's produced. So thyroid peroxidase, TPO here, thyroid peroxidase enzyme, is how we're actually producing it. So I kind of want you to think about the thyroid hormone being created by having this enzyme adding iodine to a protein. So that's plain and simple how it goes. And then as you kind of progress along this line, you're going to see how much T4 is produced. You get about 93% or so, and then there's a small amount of T3. And it's going to go out to the tissues, to your liver, and out to the periphery, where it will become activated, where it will turn into T3. Now, during that process, you're going to have a certain amount that's going to be turned into reverse T3, which is kind of an inactive form of it, which we'll touch base on, or I'll talk about a little bit later. It's an important part. But this part where it's turned into T3 from T4, you're going to see it with the 5-deiodinase enzyme. That's, plain and simple, it's removing an iodine. That's the whole name and what that enzyme means. And so as it continues along this path, then it'll go all the way out to through your bloodstream to every part of your body. And so with thyroid, I want you to kind of think of it's the fire that gets the engine moving. It is really, really important. It's our metabolism. It is the thing that gets us going. Without it, you will obviously die. You have to have thyroid hormone. It's an essential part of our being. And so here on this next slide, I kind of circled where all the different patterns will take place. So you'll see, like, over in the hypothalamus, pituitary area, that's number 1. That's what we're going to be talking about this time. And then we'll get to the other ones in future videos. All right, so pattern 1. It's primarily a pituitary issue. It is not actually a thyroid issue per se. It's a secondary thyroid issue. So if you're looking directly at the thyroid with this pituitary pattern 1 issue, you're missing the mark. So the pituitary is driving this for a couple of reasons. It could be that you're low in serotonin, low in dopamine. You could have excessive inflammation, or things like cortisol, so your stress levels are high, or your prolactin levels are off. So symptoms here, and sorry, my little camera thing is like totally blocking, so let me move that. Symptoms here, a lot of people kind of know they got thyroid issues, or at least are starting to clue in on this, but the main one's like fatigue. And that's going to be on every single thyroid problem. Brain fog is huge, chronic pain, depression, low libido is definitely going to be here, especially with low dopamine issues in addition, and then trouble sleeping. You're going to typically see this represented on labs because the TSH is going to be below 1.8. And then the T4 can be below 6. These are not necessarily below lab ranges. So on the lab that you receive, it may say everything's normal, but then you go over and you look at the lab ranges and you see, okay, yeah, everything's falling between that, what they're recommending, but then you're still below 1.8 or you're below 6 with T4. So you're not optimal when it comes to it. So this person is that person that's been told, you have no thyroid problem. But when you apply the functional ranges, so as a functional medicine doctor, I always kind of apply functional ranges here. So with functional ranges, we squeeze in those lab ranges so that we can see if you are falling outside of an optimal range or an optimal zone. So these people also present with high CRP numbers. So I don't know if you know what CRP is, but it's C-reactive peptide. And so that's pretty much showing there's overall systemic inflammation going on in the body. They may also present with high homocysteine, which often goes hand in hand with CRP, and then the cortisol levels, which I already mentioned that those could be off with stress issues. So steps going forward. I'm going to break down each of these. So reducing the stress hormones, how do we do that? Reducing inflammation, and then supporting neurotransmitter production. So first of all, with the stress hormones, I'm just moving my little face all over the place until I get used to this, so sorry about that. Let me back up. So reducing stress hormones. Of course, these are produced by the body. You need cortisol. Cortisol is what gets us going in the morning. It's normal to see a high cortisol in the morning and then low at night, and it kind of has a reverse way of looking at it whenever you look at melatonin. So like at night, you're going to get high melatonin, which is going to help you to go to sleep at night, whereas in the morning, you're going to have high cortisol, so you can get out there and get the job done. So stress is really good, but we live in a chronically stressed out society. So we need more stress. We need some support here. We don't need more stress. And so some stress can be good, but when we're overly stressed, we're going to think of things like, relationships, jobs, that can be really stressful. You can think of maybe something more chemical like blood sugar issues or inflammation. And then physical stuff. So people who have pain or hurt themselves in some sort of way, it's going to have increased stress. But blood sugar is definitely one of the big ones we deal with in America. Right now, it's estimated about 89 to 90% of people are metabolically unhealthy. And so they're probably insulin resistant, in other words. And if you understand what insulin resistance is, it's the long step before we get to diabetes. And so your body is now resistant to insulin. You're requiring more carbohydrates, more insulin, not necessarily more carbohydrates. That just tends to be what you're doing and what's causing this, but you're requiring more insulin to get the job done. So how do we counteract that? High protein, low carb diet. But that depends on the person. Definitely, you need to avoid processed foods and sugars. That's first step. And I mean, people see huge improvements when you avoid just that. Cutting out soda, cutting out the junk. Eating 3 meals spaced between 5 hours apart can be actually a helpful option. Some people will go to intermittent fasting, which can be helpful too. That's what I do oftentimes. I even started it again today. So it's a really helpful tool to bring into it. And of course, you just want to listen to your body, and you want to probably work with a practitioner if you're struggling with it. Meditation is another great way. I usually meditate each day. It helps reduce emotional stress, as well as, using something like a gratitude journal. I use a different type of journal, a prayer journal, but I use that every day, and it really, really helps with reducing stress and helping me to kind of center myself. Going out on walks into nature is also really helpful. When it comes to pain, you probably want to either do some different corrective exercises at home to see if you can work with it on your own, but a lot of times people need a good manual therapist like a chiropractor or a physical therapist, and that can really help. Then there are times where I will recommend different adaptogens. So an adaptogen is what helps you adapt to the current stress. It doesn't necessarily remove the stress, it just helps you deal with it. So ashwagandha, tulsi, rhodiola are really good ones there. Some other supplements that can be helpful are things like magnesium, B6, and you want the active form there. That's P5P, and zinc. So inflammation also drives stress hormones, which is what we're going to look at next. So reducing inflammation. This is generated by the immune system. Inflammation is a good thing. If you ever hurt yourself, the redness around it, that is one of the key things in helping you heal. So your body's actively trying to help you heal. So it is a good thing, but then we get chronic states of it. Too much inflammation can cause all sorts of issues. And then it can become a systemic thing, which then increases all sorts of problems. So we already talked about this with CRP, which is often high in these individuals with pattern 1. So we got to get a handle on this. So the first thing I usually recommend is some anti-inflammatory diet like paleo. I generally try to eat a paleo diet, or at least 80 to 90% of the time. I do good on it sometimes and sometimes not so, but usually I'm sticking to a pretty strong paleo diet. That being said, I also don't have a lot of issues anymore. I've been able to clean up a lot of my problems. And so if you are sick or chronically ill, you're going to want to stick to this pretty strictly. So you want to remove all grains. Dairy definitely should be considered unless you're going to a practitioner who can determine whether or not you are dairy sensitive. Or if you've never gone off dairy before and you're not with a practitioner, it's worth trying. And then you can always bring it back in to see if you notice any increase in symptoms. Sugar, legumes, there's a lot of different things that are removed. And then you focus on meat, fruit, and veg, especially a lot of meat, really. You want a lot of protein in your diet that comes with good, healthy fats. That alone can make a huge difference. When you remove these foods, make sure you replace them with healthy alternatives too. So like when people go gluten-free, they often are eating just junk. They're looking for like gluten-free flours and things of that sort, which is just not helpful. You want to replace it with whole foods. So processed foods are gone. And you also need to eat enough. A lot of people inadvertently don't eat enough, or they accidentally go into keto, which can be helpful, but they do that because they cut out a ton of carbs without replacing them. So just be careful when you're going forward with that, and maybe seek some help. Some supplements that I'll often give, and this is pretty popular out there, you'll see this quite frequently, it's like turmeric, resveratrol. Both of them are very anti-inflammatory. Cod liver oil can be as well, especially with how much omega-6s that we eat. Omega-6s are pro-inflammatory fatty acids, and we would want a heavier balance towards where we currently are towards omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory. Magnesium, B6 again, zinc, all these are helpful. Lastly, reduce stress, get that insulin under control, and this will help with all these things going on with the blood sugar and the inflammation. And then we can look at neurotransmitter production. Like I said, low dopamine, serotonin. These are two issues at play here. Very important for motivation and feeling joyful. Anyone who's, considering the amount of people are on antidepressants these days, people understand this. So hugely important. I myself dealt with low dopamine in the past, and it is not a fun thing. Can be very much overlooked too. We are heavily looking towards serotonin usually, and so low dopamine can get missed, and it was for me. It took a while, took me learning functional medicine to realize, oh, that's my problem. So important. So when your body is stressed, has high amounts of inflammation, neurotransmitter production is going to go down. And we also need to remember a lot of this is going to be detailed, or at least focused in the gut. Gut is hugely important. 90% of your serotonin is made in your gut. Good 50% of your dopamine is made in your gut. Really important to get the gut under control and working and healing again. As a functional medicine doctor, my primary concern, though, is root cause. So as much as we're throwing curcumin, resveratrol, and some of these other things, if I do not find the root cause, then I didn't do my job. And that's going to be even for you. So with this issue, you want to find what's the root cause, what's increasing the inflammation. And it could be all of this. A lot of times it's multifaceted. But temporary support is still important. So having things like curcumin or turmeric, or using something like the adaptogens, the tulsi and the ashwagandha. And then common support nutrients for dopamine and serotonin production. Some of it's going to be like your methylation products, if you've heard of methylation. So it's going to be like 5-MTHF, that's B9, or methylcobalamin, B12. And then back to magnesium, B6, and zinc. Some have found that St. John's wort is really, really helpful. I use it quite frequently for people that are struggling with depression. It can be really helpful. But you want to consult your doctor before really combining that with an antidepressant if you're on it. Just be careful with some of these things. And remember, herbs are fantastic, but they can have their downsides too. So it's good to be wise about it. And for that matter, remember, this is just not medical advice. Like, I just want to give you some information that could be helpful. And of course, you can always reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to talk with you, answer questions, and that sort of thing. But if you're not local or you're just looking for someone, just definitely look for a functional medicine doctor. They can be very helpful along these lines. So that's pattern 6. It really comes down to, it's the pituitary in the brain. It's primarily there. And it's caused mainly by stress, inflammation, and maybe some neurotransmitter production issues. Again, any questions, please reach out to me, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye.